By 1973, the American muscle car was in retreat. Emissions laws, gas prices, and insurance rates had all taken their toll on the staple of America. But Chevrolet wasn't giving up just yet. That year, the Chevelle was completely redesigned. It was now bigger, heavier, and wore the infamous federally mandated 5-mile-per-hour bumpers, what some call the start of the big bumper era. To many on the outside, it looked like the muscle car had been fully neutered. But buried beneath that reshaped shit metal was a surprisingly awesome car, specifically the Chevrolet Laguna offered as the top-tier Chevelle. The Laguna brought with it a new level of aerodynamics and refinement to the Chevelle platform, and in 1974, the S3 package took it a step further, giving the Laguna a unique urethane nose, sport suspension, and just enough attitude to make people take notice. And for a short time, you could still order one with a 454 cubic inch big block Chevy. The horsepower numbers weren't what they used to be, sure, but that big block heart was still beating. And on the racetrack, well, that's where the Laguna S3 wrote its own chapter. When tuned and prepped for NASCAR, it didn't just compete, the Laguna dominated. So much so that it was eventually banned from the sport outright. The all-new A-body chassis in which this car was based on was a perimeter-type frame that was stronger and far more rigid than the outgoing Chevelle models from 68 to 72. The suspension geometry was completely revised, and Chevy actually moved the rear shock absorbers to more optimal positions. They included better control arm bushings and they dialed in the front alignment. Heck, even the coil springs were now computer-matched and selected to match the weight of each individual car, a detail that was usually reserved for more premium nameplates. The result was, even though these bigger bumpers were present, the 73 Chevelle rode better, handled better, and stopped better. Underneath, there was real progress. And at the top of the lineup sat that new Laguna, which was positioned as a luxury-oriented Chevelle, with sleeker styling and added refinement as a replacement for the Malibu. The one you had to have was the Laguna Type S3. See, the S3 was a performance-oriented coupe. It kept the Laguna's upscale interior and vinyl trim, but it added with them way sportier intentions, like its unique urethane nose that was purely aerodynamically designed, with an added handling pack with a radial-tuned suspension kit that included beefier shocks and springs, front and rear sway bars. The Laguna S3 was being groomed for more than just the street. Under the hood for 1973, the top performance Chevy Laguna could still be ordered with Chevy's 454. Now, compared to the brutal Chevelle SS 454 motors that were available just a few years earlier, think the LS6 454s, this was undeniably softer than those. Still though, it had a 4-barrel carburetor and a hydraulic cam. However, output was only rated at 245 net horsepower, which was a far cry from those old gross power ratings. But torque did remain strong at 375 foot-pounds, thanks to all the added cubes. In an era when everything was getting choked out, that extra torque meant a lot. It gave it the kind of seat-of-your-pants feel that most small-block motors in this detuned era just could not compete with. Buyers still had real choices, too. When ordering your Laguna S3, a 3-speed manual came as standard, while a 4-speed manual or Chevy's proven turbo-hydromatic 3-speed auto was optional. A PZY rear end could also be ordered to help put the power and torque down, reinforcing the idea that this car wasn't just a styling exercise with that special front end. While the street cars were restrained based on regulation, the race cars of the Lagunas, well, those were anything but. Freed from the emissions equipment and tuned for straight-up competition, Laguna-bodied Chevelles became a dominant force almost immediately in NASCAR. Drivers like Cale Yarborough, Bobby Allison, and Benny Parsons racked up serious wins, proving that the new Chevelle platform and especially the Laguna's aerodynamic advantages were anything but a step backward. For 1974, Chevy fully leaned into that racing identity. The Laguna was rebranded as the Laguna Type S3 for those performance models. This was meant to shed away the remaining luxury-first image that came with the Laguna and commit to that more performance-focused coupe. These cars featured the Performance Pack suspensions, and as well as some interior adjustments, including round gauges that replaced the earlier horizontal main gauge cluster layout, giving the cockpit a more competition-inspired feel. In '74, though, emissions regulations continued to tighten their grip. The 454 was reduced to just 235 net horsepower and 360 foot-pounds of torque, about 10 horsepower less and 15 foot-pounds of torque less than the year before, and now the turbo-hydromatic 3-speed auto became the default transmission. On the street cars, the power was starting to fade for the Laguna Type S3. Even with the NASCAR-focused push on the street car variants, power was starting to fade, but the chassis balance and high-speed stability of the platform were just getting better and better. On track, the combo was still deadly. Laguna drivers added another 12 NASCAR victories in 1974 alone, cementing the car's reputation as one of the most effective stock-bodied racers of the decade, and setting the stage for the rule changes in NASCAR that would soon follow. By 1975, the 454 motor's days in road cars were numbered. Officially, Chevrolet ended the production of the big block 454 for passenger cars early that year, but the Laguna Type S3 didn't hit the market until later in the model cycle, and the result is a strange overlap, because some early 75 Chevelles may have been built with 454s. It's unclear if any of them were true S3 option cars, as Chevrolet's own brochures make no mention of it, and collectors still debate whether any factory-built 454 Lagunas made it out the door that year, which is unfortunate because in 1975, the S3 had one of the most important aerodynamic updates in the entire lineup. Gone was the upright grille design it had in the earlier models, with that specially formed nose. In its place, a sloped, integrated front fascia, often referred to as the shovel nose, was now introduced. It was a subtle change, but wildly effective. It reduced drag significantly and helped the car slice through the air more efficiently at speed. Combined with the revised suspension tuning from the previous 2 years, the S3 was now more stable than ever, and although the power options were shrinking on the road car side, the Laguna had matured to one of the most competent handling cars in Chevy's lineup. See, without that big block up front, even though a small block Chevy was more gutless at the time, it did weigh a lot less, which helped front-end feel and reduced understeer. On track, the payoff for the Laguna was obvious. These cars continued to rack up wins in the 1975 and 76 NASCAR seasons. Its aerodynamic edge and balanced chassis made it a favorite among top drivers. The secret was out by this point, and by 77, the car's dominance became too much to ignore. NASCAR first forced restrictor plates on Laguna-bodied racing entries, and then they ruled the S3 ineligible as a limited production model going forward. Across just 5 seasons, Laguna-bodied Chevelles claimed 53 NASCAR victories, 4 manufacturers' championships, and 3 drivers' titles, which is no easy feat. And yet, despite that success, the road-going versions faded quite quietly. For a car that was so successful in NASCAR, there really was never much of an appreciation for the road-going versions of these cars, which I find surprising. Being such a dominant racer, you would think these would have maybe sold better, but it was a weird time to be a muscle car, especially when it seemed like every year the road car versions of the NASCAR just got slower and slower. By 1976, power was down across the board at Chevrolet, especially with the Chevelle. Performance took a back seat to comfort and compliance, and by the end of the year, the Laguna was gone from the lineup entirely. In total, Chevy built just over 108,000 Lagunas between 73 and 76, but of those, only a fraction were equipped with the 454, and even fewer then still survive today in original condition, which makes the 454 S3 cars an extremely rare piece of mid-70s muscle car history. Because the 454s in these cars were heavily detuned from the ones in the late 60s, early 70s, I think that collectors largely ignored them because they didn't have that crazy seat-to-your-pants feel that some of the old-school bruisers did. Even when in the turns, these cars performed a lot better. It doesn't help that the trim pieces made uniquely for the Lagunas are super hard to find, and reproduction support for the 73 to 76 cars is thin at best. But all of that being said, the Laguna's NASCAR pedigree is unquestioned, and that's why it was worthy of a video. Thank you all for watching another Rare Cars video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did and have any stories or insights about your ownership experience with a Chevy Laguna, please go ahead and share it down below in the comments. I would love to hear it. As always, thanks for watching though, and I will see you all in the next one.